Hi, John Bennett's here. In this video, branding expert Glen Campbell from Brand gives us some great tips and some compelling reasons why musicians and bands need to be a brand. Glen, what is a brand?
Well, I think that's a really good question, and it's a question that I think should be asked a whole lot more. Firstly, let me start by answering what a brand is not. Just because you have a business doesn't mean you necessarily have a brand. There's a lot of businesses out there that think because they develop a good logo and they put the logo consistently on everything that they're a brand. Well, that's just not true. There's a lot of businesses out there that do a lot of advertising and they think because they've got significant brand awareness that they have a brand. Well, that's not true either. There's also a lot of businesses out there that do a lot of transactions. They turn over a lot of money, and businesses like telecommunications providers or financial institutions, they think they're a brand as well, and they're not. So now we get to the definition of what a brand is. A brand really is a promise that elicits a powerful, positive emotional response. And some of the examples I just gave you a moment ago, where you've got telecommunications providers is a good example. They think they elicit a powerful, positive emotional response, but they don't. In fact, they probably do anti-branding activity because, you talk to anybody and they have these kinds of interactions with them and they're incredibly negative, in fact, at pretty much every brand contact point, and especially when the bill comes in. So a brand really is a promise that elicits a powerful, positive emotional response consistently.
How do you turn a band from a business into a brand, and why is it so important?
Well, I think it's crucial for musicians to know, because usually musicians are very passionate and talented people, and they get into music for the sake of music, and that's well and good. It's like any organisation producing a product or a service. It does it for lots of idealistic reasons, but you've got to start thinking about, before you start thinking about yourself as a brand, I think a band has got to think about itself as a business. There's got to be a commercial model. There's got to be an understanding of how you can make this enterprise sustainable, so that you can continue to turn out that music. If you think about the way things were in the old days, I mean, bands were discovered, weren't they? And a manager or a publisher or a promoter or someone like that found these guys, and then they just sort of fashioned them from where they were into a business. I think these days, my opinion anyway, is that bands need to take the power back into their own hands, and they need to control their own future and their own destiny. And they need to think about these things like, well, what kind of business are we going to be, and what kind of financial model or commercial model we're going to have, and also how do we then turn that into a brand that is sustainable. And if you think about my definition a moment ago of what a brand is, there's a lot of elements to that, of course, being able to ensure that you get this sort of compelling, sort of positive emotional response, not just from the music, but from the business, from the band members as a unit and individually, from every single contact point. What they stand for, where they draw the line, what is their point of difference, who are these guys and why are they here? Why should they be relevant or important to me? Or are they just going to be another one-night wonder? I mean, brands are not one-night wonders. Brands are sustainable, powerful and enduring, and more so, they're profitable if they're well run.
What questions do you need to ask to begin the branding process?
To begin the branding process, I think you've got to think about, you've got to sort of shift it up a little bit and say, well, what kind of environment are we operating in here? You've got to look at who your consumer is and understand them really well. I think you've got to understand who your competitors are. I mean, it's a very complex and competitive environment, isn't it? And what is it about you that's going to make you stand out? What is it about you that's going to have people stop and take attention? So you've got to look at the competitive aspect of the business. You've got to look at the consumer, and especially the consumer, because you want to have a dialogue with the consumer. You want to be able to communicate with them. It's got to be two-way. They've got to be engaged in you, and not for the short term, as we talked about before. I think you've got to look at the sort of business that you want to build. I mean, who are you and what do you stand for? So I always start with brands and say, what's your vision? What is it that, you know, what's your North Star? What are you heading towards? What is your big goal? What's the goal that you guys as a unit are looking to achieve and are looking to push to go forward to? What's your core purpose? I mean, why do you get out of bed every day, you know, for? That's going to be sustainable for you as a group of people. And that's really important because the core purpose is something that you do every day to really push yourself to achieve that vision. You know, it seems to me that bands, not unlike most organisations, don't think about these sorts of things. And so therefore they become very transactional, or they become very commodity based, and they don't know what their next thing is going to be. They're just moving from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. You know, the sort of, you know, the thought of the day, or the thing that, you know, is of most interest to them or stimulates them at that period of time. So you've got to be able to move beyond that, and you've got to be able to have something that's more powerful and deeply held than that. So vision, you know, the big goal, the core purpose, what are the values of the band? I mean, why do these people as a group bond together that is going to be so powerful and important for them? Or are they just going to be a bunch of people who have just sort of found, you know, a connection, albeit loose, and that could be broken quite easily as soon as the tough times hit, and you don't want that to happen. So there are a few of the questions that I would ask, and then of course out of all that stuff, once you start to develop some clarity and focus around that stuff, then you can start to think about, you know, what your image is. What are your cultural determinants or signature behaviours? What is it that makes you different from everybody else out there, and what is it that's going to connect you most to your target audience, that is really going to create a bond that is powerful? Because unless you have that, you know, really you're just a part of the mire, the malaise out there, and you're just another one, and you're never going to make it. It's never going to happen, is it? John, I think the important thing about a band is that they're no different to any other organisation. They're out there producing something. In this case, it's content, really. They're producing something that they're hoping people will like. My view is this: unless, you know, keeping the passion in line and the idealism there's absolutely necessary. But my view is, unless you start thinking about yourself as a business, and then you elevate yourself up and start to understand what it is that constitutes a brand, and then start living like that, acting like that, and doing that, you know, I'm afraid that you'll just become another commodity trader that is not really going to enjoy what success is all about in this very difficult and complex and cluttered industry. So think about being a brand and understand what it takes to be that, and then move forward in that way, and I'm sure the journey will be a good one.
Hope you enjoyed today's interview with Glen Campbell. To make sure you stay up to date with all our interviews and tutorials, make sure you hit the subscribe button down here on the right hand side, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye.